Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Catholic Entrepreneur. I'm Matt Pinto. We address topics of faith, of business. I did the math in my head not too long ago. There's 168 hours in a week. About a third of our time, give or take, is spent at work. So to me, this is a topic where if we can bring our faith into it, it's really integral to our busy lives. A lot of times we address kind of big questions or philosophical questions, but today's show is really going to be rooted in the eminently practical. How to choose an attorney and what to look for in an attorney. Because if you're running a ministry, a business, certainly if you're part of a big organization, legal questions are going to come up, and having a good attorney is vital. I have a friend with me who's also an attorney who I've used a few times. In fact, we started out on the opposite side. You were representing someone else in a particular situation, and then after that, we engaged you because I thought you were really, really good at what you do. Mike Broadhurst, good to be with you.
Thank you so much, Matt.
A quick word of thanks to our sponsor, Mission Advantage. They engage in Catholic recruiting. If you're looking for a higher level recruit at your office, a senior position, Mission Advantage is someone you need to turn to. And thank you. You can reach them at missionadv.org or look in the show notes. So you know the firepower with us today to address this topic. Mike has been an attorney for 26 years. He is with the firm Weir,
Greenblatt Pierce.
Weir Greenblatt. You say it better than I do. Weir Greenblatt Pierce. Mike is focused on business litigation. He's a graduate of Georgetown University. He did schooling at the University of Pennsylvania and then got his law degree at Temple University. I think he would say most importantly, he is married for 29 years to Mary and has 2 kids. And Mike, again, great to be with you. Thanks for joining us.
Amen. Thank you, Matt.
Mike, I think engaging an attorney for the first time is intimidating. Why are we, why was I, but I'm guessing a lot of people. I had a relative not too long ago needed to engage an attorney, and I think even arriving at the office and then sitting down feels intimidating. Why is this, do you think?
I think we haven't done a great job at making ourselves accessible and understood, ourselves being lawyers. Folks are coming to lawyers when there's a need, there's a problem. And they're worried about the problem, usually. And they want a good resolution, and they want it quickly, and they want it painlessly. And that's hard to do. And so with all of that weight coming into the first encounter, and then bearing all that in mind, you have to worry about some cost. Mm-hmm. And you're probably going to go through the process, and it's going to take some time, and it's going to make you uncomfortable. Those are all things I think that contribute to the intimidation factor. And then people don't understand the process itself. Mm-hmm. They don't understand the language. Mm-hmm. And we don't do a very good job, I think, of breaking it down and making it much more accessible.
Give me 7 things that someone should look for when hiring an attorney.
Absolutely. You're in search of someone who gets it, somebody who's focused on you, somebody who's going to listen to you, someone who understands your goal, someone who understands your problem.
Get it versus what? What's the opposite of get it?
When you engage an attorney, you want that person to have a focus on you and a grasp of your goals, somebody who's going to listen to you. And that I sum up with the phrase, somebody who gets it. And I borrow that from a conversation I had with a client a number of years ago who was expressing to me his frustration in finding somebody who gets it.
See, that does surprise me, Mike, because I think my default is if I were to go into an attorney's office, and let's say I've used 3 different attorneys to represent me in the past, I think I just kind of project on them that they get it because they're smart, they're an attorney, they get it. Yeah. But you're talking, no, Matt, there's actually there are those who have not maybe other agendas. Maybe that's too strong.
We're just like other people. Sometimes we get distracted. Sometimes we have other agendas. There are a fair number of lawyers who maybe don't take the time to really focus and understand what you need. And that's what I'm trying to drive at.
Got it.
you're also going to be looking for somebody you can trust. As in many other relationships in our lives, when we're looking for somebody like that, we turn to people that we trust and we ask for their advice. A family member, a friend, a lawyer you know, and asking for a little advice. Come to them with the need. The need you have is going to directly impact who you work with. And timing. How urgent is your need? And by the way, let's step back for a
Wouldn't
second.
most be urgent? Because you just don't randomly kind of decide you need an attorney. It's almost situational.
Well, if you're young and healthy and you maybe have a good business that's going along fairly well and you have a younger family, you don't necessarily prioritize writing a will. Mm-hmm. So you have some time in that engagement.
Got it.
Versus, someone who's been served with a lawsuit and needs to respond in 20 days. That's where a need is immediate. Where does the person practice physically? Because the locality matters. Not every legal need is based in geography, but many are.
And don't you have restrictions on where you can practice?
We do indeed. Most lawyers are admitted to bars in the state where they went to school or began practice. Many of us are admitted in multiple jurisdictions, but we're not yet at a point where there's a national practice of law.
So someone's driving, they're catching most of it, but it's good that we compartmentalize their brain. So someone who kind of really gets your situation versus maybe one size fits all or maybe distraction. What is your particular situation? What is the need? Timing was one. Another item you said is really a cut to the chase is just speak to someone that you trust who's used attorneys and find out, what their experience is like.
I wouldn't necessarily say that speaking to someone you trust is going to result immediately in you landing in the right hands. Mm-hmm. I think it's more likely that they're going to give you a good next step. Mm-hmm. So they may introduce you to someone who knows a good attorney, somebody they trust, and that attorney hopefully can guide you further. Not necessarily that they would be the person you ultimately need, but perhaps that they can be someone who can tell you what you don't know.
I remember when I engaged you for just a basic operating agreement for a document, but there was a particular nuance, and I even remember you saying, I need to consult with another colleague in the office. You spawned a couple of questions here. So should we be intimidated by interviewing an attorney? I almost feel that, they're removed in a certain manner that maybe I'd be encroaching, or no, absolutely not. You should absolutely be interviewing an attorney with, and what type of questions, again, should we be asking?
You should absolutely feel comfortable interviewing an attorney. And if an attorney resists that, I think that's probably a good sign that you don't want to go with that person. You should ask them questions about their background. You should get comfortable with them as a person. Because if you're going to be working closely with somebody on an issue that matters to you greatly, you're going to need to develop a rapport with that person, and you're going to need to develop a set of expectations about how you're going to communicate with that person. And Matt, we haven't necessarily touched on this yet, but another big piece of this is cost. Mm-hmm. And it's very important that there be a conversation at the outset, and that ultimately will be reduced to a written agreement spelling out the scope of the engagement, the costs, and how you will be charged for that engagement, and a series of other expectations like confidentiality. And to the extent there are any other interests that come into play, let's say, for example, there's more than one person you're engaging this lawyer for, there might arise what we refer to as conflicts of interest. All of those need to be put on the table at the outset of the engagement.
I'm going to come back to the cost question because obviously it's an elephant in the living room. So one of the characteristics of maybe to look for is the size of the firm that someone is with. I can see a certain advantage to a big firm because they would have resources and they can call on people. I'm also intrigued with the idea of a sole proprietor because there feels like there would be an intimacy there that could be good. So I guess you got large, you have maybe boutiques, and then you have sole proprietors. Can you give me a quick pro and con for those who are listening?
I think you've hit on them, Matt. I mean, smaller firms tend to be less formal. Larger firms try very hard to make themselves relatable, but at the end of the day, they're very large businesses, very large operations. And I've practiced in medium-sized firms, very large firms, and smaller firms. Mm-hmm. And larger firms have resources in multiple jurisdictions, they tend to have specialists in multiple practice areas, and that can be very useful. Let's say you're starting out, you're beginning, you're founding, and you want to make sure you are on solid footing. You don't necessarily need the full set of capabilities of a large firm to achieve something like that. I will say large firms tend to be significantly more expensive, but small firms can be expensive as well.
One thing that I took comfort in, I think with your firm and then another firm that I used is I received in the beginning a kind of scope letter that told me what the rates were going to be. There was another situation now that I think about it, maybe 15, 20 years ago, but it was pretty one-dimensional. And the attorney quoted me, now this is 20 years ago, was I think a flat fee of like $400 for whatever the exercise was. So for those who are listening, all those things are on the table. You might be able to identify scope. You might be able to contain something. Do attorneys, when they do scope projects like that, are they pretty accurate in their estimates? Like if they estimate that this should probably cost $7,000, is it generally pretty accurate?
That's hard to say, and it depends on the attorney themselves.
Only an attorney. I guess you use those words depend and hard to say often.
It depends.
By the way, it must be terrible for Mary at home to have an argument with you because you're giving caveats and context all the time. But go ahead.
More often than not, we find ourselves
with an arbiter in the middle. But God, I'm sorry.
Thanks be to God. No doubt, Matt. There are options, and that should be absolutely on the table at that initial set of conversations. There are options. Generally speaking, lawyers have charged by the hour for their services. Mm-hmm. That is not the only option. Oftentimes, a scope is sufficiently clear at the beginning that one can quote a price and charge a flat fee. So you're in and out, and you know what you're going to pay from the beginning, and that's that. There are other options as well, and we probably have heard something about those. For example, a contingent fee matter. If you have an action, particularly a lawsuit, where you stand to recover a certain amount, oftentimes lawyers will offer to deliver their services in exchange for a portion of the recovery. That's a contingent fee.
We had good success because I think we had a whole bunch of contracts. I was working in publishing. We had a whole bunch of contracts, and I think we had success also with a retainer one time because it was consistent work. We knew what it was, and I actually think that we got good rates because of the fact it was on retainer.
Having a specialist on retainer is wise and very helpful.
Okay,
and it spreads out the cost.
So we would get billed, each month for the work, and the bill would close out on the last day of the month. But I wouldn't get the bill maybe till like the 16th or 17th of the next month due to busyness of life or whatever. And then I would forget during those first 16 days of the month, I'm racking up additional hours, and then I would get surprised. So talk a little bit logistically, just kind of how it works. I come to you, I meet with you initially. I think each time I've met with someone initially, there wasn't a fee. It was maybe just understanding the problem. But walk us through kind of how it operationally works when you work with a lawyer or a firm.
Generally speaking, the first conversations you're having is really just getting to know one another. By and large, lawyers do not charge for that. However, there are some specialists who will charge a consultation fee.
Okay.
It's usually a modest number comparatively. If they're very busy, they may feel it's necessary to charge for their time at the outset. Mm-hmm. But in the beginning, it's really critical, and we as lawyers are under an ethical obligation to put in writing the scope letter as you described it, and that will set forth.
So that should be expected.
Absolutely.
That's required. Okay,
absolutely.
Good.
What's expected, and what the terms are, the economic terms are. And then there are some other issues that should be worked in there as well, like confidentiality, potential conflicts of interest. So at the very beginning, you need a letter. You need an engagement letter. Once that's in place, depending on the arrangement, if, for example, someone asks you for a retainer, an attorney asks you for a retainer, generally speaking, what they're asking you for is it's essentially a deposit. And then their services will be charged against that. The balance will be repaid to you at a certain point down the line if it's not consumed. They may ask you for additional funds if the retainer's been exhausted. If you're operating on an hourly basis, I think you wanted to know a little bit more about that. Lawyers record their time every day. That time is divided up and then sent off to the client, multiplied by their hourly rate. And there is a bit of a lag time, on the end of the month and the time when the bill goes out. It's important to keep in mind that every time you pick up the phone when you're on an hourly engagement, that you are likely, the clock is likely.
Yeah. I mean, I think this is a question that I definitely have had, and I got to tell you, there have been times I've been hesitant to pick up for that very reason, which is why retainers in some regard made me feel better because, again, you do wonder, but it does also, hone you, because I think I've even said to my team in the past, make sure we're asking questions that we really need to know answers to versus just kind of shooting the breeze in a sense.
But Matt, I think this goes back to a point that I was making earlier, and that is work with somebody who gets it and somebody you trust. You don't want to be so hesitant to pick up that phone that you could hurt operating
yourself.
Without the benefit of that attorney's advice. The point of retaining an attorney is to be able to have an advisor who helps you navigate through these challenges. And you want to be able to use them. You want to be able to access them. And if you're so concerned about cost, maybe have a discussion with the attorney about how to manage it.
Sure.
Because it can all be worked out.
Yeah. Is it common for a client to maybe push back after the fact about the bills and how common is it that bills are adjusted even? I mean, I think our listeners would maybe find this helpful.
I wouldn't necessarily call it common. It does happen, and sometimes it's called for, and sometimes it's appropriate.
So if you're sensing, you should bring up that conversation.
If you have a question, pose the question. If you don't understand something on your bill, find out what what happened or what you need to know to make yourself comfortable with it.
Sure. Two questions that are kind of related. I do Zoom calls 5 times a day. Zoom works very, very well.
Sure.
So outside of jurisdiction, engaging an attorney virtually like that, it can work?
You mean hiring somebody on the other side of the country, so to speak?
Well, yeah. I guess that's a problem if they...
theoretically. It depends on the area of the law. So, for example, intellectual property. Let's say you need an IP attorney. That person doesn't have to be in the next town over.
Yeah.
That person could be on the other side of the country.
But if litigation or something is involved.
If litigation is involved and you've been sued in, say, Idaho.
Got it.
You need a lawyer who operates in Idaho.
So a corollary to that, I've heard the LegalZoom commercials. I've heard the anecdotes that artificial intelligence is passing bar exams. How much recourse should we have to those? How concerned should we be about those?
Two different subjects, it seems to me. So with regard to artificial intelligence applied to the law is like artificial intelligence applied to a lot of businesses. It will have its place, but it's also still in beginning stages, it seems to me. I think I haven't necessarily heard about AI programs passing the bar. What I've heard about is lawyers getting in trouble for using AI in writing briefs and presenting their cases for their clients. I think AI, like I said, is still in early stages. It will have application. I'm not sure we're there yet. Now, with regard to LegalZoom and other kind of online resources, they can be helpful. I think that there's no substitute for a well-trained, experienced attorney. I wouldn't say LegalZoom is completely, problematic. Frankly, I don't know their offerings that well. But I think if you're serious about your business you should find a better resource.
So Mike, 2-3 times a year I'll meet with my financial advisor, and we'll just kind of see where we are, see where the market is, and this. I've wondered whether it might just be good to get together with. I use you at times, but others as well, just to get together with them, just to see what are we missing. Should there be things in our current practice that we should be buttoned up?
Absolutely.
Because I do wonder, the majority of us listening, there could be not only exposures, but again, some good fences make for good neighbors types of documents that should be. So I wonder if that's good practice.
It is, without a doubt. And I try to do that as often as I can. A lot of times we're busy and our clients are busy, so it can be challenging. But staying connected and staying aware of what's going on with your client is absolutely a best practice. So
final question, it's sort of the one that we asked in the beginning, but maybe so if someone thinks that they might have an exposure or they have just aspects of their business that need to be buttoned up, they want to start the process with an attorney, first steps would be to maybe speak with someone they trust and first maybe to lay out a scope of the type of work they need. And does that sound all correct?
It does. It does. Getting started, is that the question?
Yeah.
How to get started with it? Sit down with, hopefully you've identified one or more candidates to provide these services for you. Sit down with them, get to know them a little bit, present your problem to them in candor, because number one, confidentiality is key to to good representation, it seems to me. Give your lawyer the facts. Tell them what the reality is. Don't tell them what you think they want to hear. Tell them what the facts are. And then let them advise you. And I think the point you made about revisiting that regularly is really wise and helpful.
Very good. Well, Mike, thanks again. And as I shared, everyone, a lot of the points that we made today, they're going to end up in a pretty document that we'll produce for you. You can get it in the show notes. But Mike, thanks again. Appreciate your time, and I learned a good bit today, and hopefully our listeners did as well. Thanks.
Very good to be with you, Matt.
Great. I do want to thank our sponsor as well, Mission Advantage. If you're looking to place a senior level executive in your Catholic organization, turn to Mission Advantage. You can reach them at missionadv.org, and you'll see the link in the show notes. Thank you for joining us, and we'll be back soon with another great topic.